Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Friday. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I have a special guest with me tonight. Her name is Jocelyn. She is a former Starbucks employee. Jocelyn, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So I want to hear about your experience at Starbucks. From what I understand, you were fired by Starbucks, I believe, because you tried to unionize at one of the locations. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I started working at Starbucks in August of 2015. And over the years, I had realized that there were some things about Starbucks that just weren't up to the standard that they wanted to hold themselves to. So every single time I would complain or say something, nothing would get done, or it would be ignored. Or if there was an investigation, they would say like some things were founded or some things weren't. And they kind of just ignored me and vilified me. And then the unionization process happened in Buffalo, which got I think it became this nationwide thing. And so we started hearing about the union in August of last year. And then in December, when they won their union, this is when we started talking about it more seriously, because it became such a topic of interest, because now they're getting now they have the possibility of getting all these better benefits and, safety on the job, and, just a way for us workers in the lowest rung of this pyramid to really get a say in the company and the way we work. And so after we discussed it within our store, we all decided it would be a really good idea to form a union within our store. We had 100% signatures for our union cards, and then we became public in February. And that is when the intense union busting started in our store, and we lost the vote 5-6.
Wow. Which location was this?
This is the Great Neck location.
Okay. Why do you think some people voted against having a union at that location?
Well, originally everyone had agreed that this would be a good idea. So the reason why, I believe, is because the managers and the DM started coming into the store. I mean, our manager was there almost every day anyway, but they started discussing about how unions are bad, how you could possibly be gambling away all of your benefits, how if we were to become a unionized store, you couldn't get promoted, or you wouldn't be able to transfer, and you'd be stuck in the store, and how you couldn't pick up shifts at other stores, and how you might possibly lose all the benefits that you want to gain. Nothing is for certain, and they would really pick at people's vulnerabilities within all of this, and really just make them nervous about what a union could do for them. And then they started vilifying me by saying that I was they wouldn't be able to talk to the manager anymore, and they would have to come to me because I would be the person in charge, or they wouldn't be able to talk to the manager at all because he needed a union rep. And it was just completely ridiculous things that obviously did not fall within my responsibilities as a shift supervisor. So they would scare people into thinking that a union was a bad thing. And at some point it worked in our store, and that's how we lost. It was just intense union busting within our store.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
The store manager and the district manager mainly.
Okay. I'm curious, why did your location in particular want to start a union?
Well, I think there was like like a lot of things. Well, for me, my biggest issues are always going to be safety on the job. So like there were things where I felt that weren't being like addressed properly. Like COVID was like a really big catalyst for the entire movement. I mean, like because of COVID and the pandemic, you saw how companies were treating their laborers at like the people who are essential. Like we were essential workers,
Right.
and we could be there throughout the pandemic, and there would be like just like so I this is my that location in Great Neck was my third store, but the one before it was a drive-through, and
Okay.
that's the one I worked in like through most of the pandemic, and it was the only store open, and it would have like a line around the building and down the main road, and people would be waiting on this line for an hour to 2 hours. And you would think because of how intense this job is that especially during that time that you would be more careful during like COVID protocols and following, like if people feel sick and they're telling you they're sick, you should, let them go home. But instead, like so many people had a quarantine. Like this is before vaccines were available. Um, and I had quarantined, I think, 8 times within a year. I was,
Wow.
yeah, it was really intense. And then they had hazard pay only for like three. They only were paying you hazard pay for the first 3 times that you got exposed to COVID at the time. And then after that, everything would have to be taken out of vacation pay or sick pay. And some people hadn't worked there long enough to even get that. So some people had to quarantine with no pay. And a lot of it was stuff that like could have been preventable if they had just like listened to people, but they didn't want to. And then when I came to address this, they were kind of just like, this is unfounded, and they would just say things that were like that I was like lying, and when I wasn't, and they found some things that were like that they admitted that I was telling the truth. Um, but then like a couple months later, the same thing kept happening again, and then in this new store, something similar like that happened also, where someone said that they were sick and that they think they had COVID, and the managers were just like, no, you have to come in, don't go to an urgent care, like because if you go to an urgent care, there's like a 99% chance you're going to come out with a positive result or something along those lines. And I mean, that person in particular just ended up getting his test anyway, and he came out positive with COVID, and he was almost made to work. So it's like situations like that. I mean, that's just the pandemic. There were other things outside of the pandemic that had happened. But like that was a big thing, or like just a living wage. Like New York is, it's getting more expensive by the day. I
Mhm.
feel like, and like the wages that they're paying us are just not livable in this state. So that was another thing that I wanted to fight for also. And just having a say. Like I just want, if you're going to hold me to a certain standard, I want you to be accountable for that. The standards that you're having us follow. Also, I shouldn't be an at will employee. So
Right. Right. I worked at Starbucks many, many years ago when I was in undergrad, and I remember they were meticulous about us, making sure that make sure you wash your hands every time you touch this. Make sure you wash your hands. We had a sanitizing station where we would sanitize the blenders and all of that jazz. So it was interesting to me that they still wanted these employees to come in and make drinks and touch food that they were going to be passing on to customers, even if they may have been sick.
yeah, I think that was just made no sense to me. And at some point, I just felt like it was profits over people. And when I first started with the company, I felt like they took standards like that a little more seriously, also. And I
Mhm.
think they have faltered over the last couple of years. But it's still like, even when I first started with the company, there were things like time theft, like where like I remember my first manager had been taking minutes off of like out like editing our punches. So if I worked at 6:15, she would write I worked at 6:30, and she or like 6:20 or something, just to change the time. And when someone else, because I wasn't the first person to notice this, it was someone else who noticed it at first and came up to her and said, "Hey, this is like illegal, right?" And ever since then, like at that moment, it was like she treated her like in such an awful way and never was just like so rude to her. And so when they came up to her, they were like, Jocelyn, go and check your time punches, make sure they're correct because she's changing them, but approach her like as if not accusatory so she doesn't retaliate against you this way. Approach to her like as if you think the system messed up. And that's what I did. And I found out that she had changed my punches, my punch in times and my punch out times. And it's and I think that was like the first instance. That was like my first year at Starbucks. And I was just like, I guess I was young and I didn't really know what to do at that time. I didn't realize how illegal it was. But that's like from the beginning of Starbucks, even when they had like better health and safety standards in place to the end of Starbucks, and really, and my experience at Starbucks, um, that's how they've always run. It's just profits over people. It's so horrible, honestly.
That's well, first of all, I think that that's illegal. And then second of all, what was the purpose of her doing that? So they could save money?
Yeah, I think it's like saving money and labor. So they get like a schedule of like they get like a weekly like labor forecast, I think it is, where they're allowed to schedule a certain amount of hours.
Mhm.
And they have to keep it within that certain amount of hours. So like if so I think, and it's one of the main reasons as to like why all of the Starbucks are currently so short staffed or were so short staffed is because the managers are only given like let's say, I don't know, like 200, 300 hours to schedule people every week, and they just have not enough hours to give.
Mhm.
So they just cut like people's hours here and there. Mine, after I started the union campaign, my hours were cut like pretty drastically. Um, but they're given like a certain amount of hours, and if they don't hit that, I think they get some kind of like reward, or it's better for them. I'm not really sure what it is, but the company like monitors how much they're allowed to give, like schedule people.
That's crazy. Now I know that you were eventually removed. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was fired July 27th. They had fired me for different, like, so they had cited different times where I was late for under 5 minutes. And then, yeah, which is insane on its own because there were people who were definitely late way more than 5 minutes that were not written up. It was just because she didn't like me, or I'm not sure. I think it was definitely more of a union retaliation, because I was one of the main organizers, and definitely I was out in the media and press more than my coworkers. Um, but and and then there was also an incident with a key where like I had been in a car accident the month before. But I opened the store every day, and I guess I had been changing rentals, and I had changed rentals like the week before, but I had opened the store the day before also. And I guess I lost my key, and I immediately called my manager. I called all the other shift supervisors because I needed to open the store, and I had yeah, so I had been in contact, did everything I was supposed to do, got a spare key for the next day, and opened the store the next day. And then the day after, my manager found my key by her desk. And then she didn't tell me about it. So I texted her, heard you found my key. And she said that she didn't know my key was still lost. And then 3 weeks later, fired me for not for losing the key, but for not telling her it remained lost. And which was the words written on the separation form. It was for not telling her the key remained lost. But she found it.
Interesting. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of what happened to Chris Smalls when he was working at Amazon and he was trying to organize the workers there. They'll find another reason to get rid of you. I don't know what are the employment laws in your state. Is it an at-will employment state as well?
I do believe we are at will employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that in my state too, where they don't really have to. technically they don't really have to give you a reason per se. I'm curious, and this is something that I heard yesterday actually. Are you aware that some of the stores, the Starbucks stores that have unionized, are now being told that they're not going to receive certain Starbucks benefits that they were receiving before?
Yes, actually, I did hear about that, which is disgusting. This is just Starbucks' like attempt to retaliate against those stores, which and it's interesting too because the store I used to work at in Great Neck is also not receiving benefits, though they are not a unionized store. So I'm thinking that maybe it's even if you like have tried to unionize, because they haven't received their raises that they were supposed to get on August 1st.
Interesting. Has anyone at your location in particular, do you know if they've tried to seek any type of legal counsel or contact anyone at Starbucks headquarters? Or I'm not sure how it would work further up. I know HR can be a nightmare and they usually side with management. But has anyone else reached out from that location to try to get some type of help?
I am not sure if anyone else has reached out. We do have like something ongoing with the NLRB. So I hope that will, help. And I know that the NLRB like just ruled yesterday, or there was some something like a trial or something that happened yesterday where they said that Starbucks has to give everyone back pay for the raises that unionized stores didn't receive. They have to receive those benefits. But as of right now, in my location, I'm not sure if anyone has other than myself.
Wow. So what has been your current situation now? Have you been able to find other employment or you're still looking?
I have been able to find other employment. I'm currently in the paperwork for all of that. Um, so yeah, so that's what I've been doing really this entire week. Um, but yeah, we did a rally last week. I'm still like trying to be like active within like the Workers United, Starbucks Workers United. Um, and yeah, I guess that's just how it is. And I'm preparing for whatever's going to be held with the NLRB. I think next month or next within the next 2 months.
I know there was recently a Starbucks worker on here a couple of days ago, actually. They are a part of the strike here in Boston. There's a Starbucks store that's on strike on Commonwealth Avenue. They've actually been on strike for over 30 days. And they're receiving like a tremendous amount of support from people in the community. And I'm wondering, have you spoken to anyone that's still at your previous location if they're thinking about possibly like going on a strike, or you think they're probably too afraid to go there?
I think they're definitely just too afraid. They saw the way the management treated me and retaliated against me. And then they turned some people who were pro union very like anti union. So it just became this like really weird hostile work environment where it hadn't been before. Um and management blamed that on me. It was very strange. But either way, I think they're in a place where they're a little afraid of retaliation right now because they don't want to be fired either.
Yeah, I can understand that as well. This is the problem, you guys. When people say, oh, we'll just try to form a union, number one, it's not that easy. You have to get as many people on board with you as possible. And then, just like Jocelyn was telling you, you can have everybody on board. And then all it takes is for the store manager to complain to them and tell them that, well, you don't really want to go in that route, and then change people's minds. And next thing you know, you go to vote and all of a sudden the votes aren't there, even if they would have been there before. You have to deal with that. You have to deal with retaliation, which is supposed to be illegal. And I don't understand how these companies are getting away with it. Amazon has done it. Starbucks has done it. I've talked to, I think you're the third former Starbucks employee that I've spoken to within the past, like I'd say 3 months. It's a constant problem. And I just don't understand why legal is not getting involved at all, because I've seen you guys on so many different shows, and I wish somebody would just grab these cases at Starbucks and come in and just lay down the hammer. I really do.
Yeah, I think it's like the legal process works slowly because I'm going through that way also. But
Mhm.
I know that the Memphis Seven, so there were 7 workers fired in Memphis like some time ago, and I think February. Because I remember it was the same week that we went public that they were fired, all 7 of them. And they were recently told that they have to be reinstated, and Starbucks is just trying to appeal that in court. So um, it's ridiculous because they obviously lost. They were told that they were doing illegal things, and they just are. They're just so stubborn and unwilling to realize that what they're doing is wrong. They want to keep presenting to the world that they're this good and ethical company by performing all these like it's just performative activism, and then on top of that being like one of the biggest union busting names out there right now. So like I just don't understand what their thought process is in all this. But yeah, with the legal processes I think just a little slower, but we're going through it. We are.
What would you say was the typical, I guess, like average wage for employees at your store?
So at our store, we actually, because we're less than a mile away, I think, or around a mile away from a New York City, from Queens, we do get like the Queens pay. So the starting pay I think is around almost $16, and then for a shift supervisor, I think it's like maybe starting at like I think $19 or $20 if you are starting new. Um,
Okay. Which
so
isn't much for New York. I'm smiling because I
no,
know that's not that's not
definitely not
much.
in New York. Like, I think I was just looking at like the housing like cost for everything recently, and it's just nothing is um available. It's becoming this like there's just like this really big divide on like just who can stay here and who has to like leave in order to be able to afford living. Like, there's a lot of people in New York that just are going to eventually have to move out, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're experiencing that here in Boston too. It's just the rent actually decreased like when the pandemic started, and because people were actually moving out of the city or going back to live with their parents, which I totally understand because we were shut down. But then once they started opening businesses back up and people started to come back, I think people didn't hold out long enough. So once they started coming back in, the rents just started to go right back up. So I think that there's a lot of things going on here. People aren't paid a living wage. Obviously, these companies have a superiority complex where they don't treat the workers with respect or they exploit the workers. I got to tell you, when the whole Starbucks unionization started, I was kind of surprised because, like I said, I worked at Starbucks when I was in college. I didn't have any of those experiences that people are having now. But again, like I said, that was many years ago. And I know over time things can change. And it seems like to me, Starbucks is one of those companies that just decided to get greedy. And I noticed this because I'm like, do you need a Starbucks on every corner, on every block? No, not necessarily. And then at the same time, they have these expectations where I know for us, like when it came to making like the drinks, like they were very strict about it. You can't give people extra pumps of like the syrup or anything like that. It had to be made to like their liking. And if you have a worker shortage at a store like that, those stores get really busy. For those who don't know, if you don't go to Starbucks, Starbucks stores can get really busy. And if you don't have enough people working behind the counter, it can be pretty stressful. I don't even know what it's like to work in the drive-through, what you were talking about recently, but I can imagine.
Oh, it was awful. I remember there was this one time, and like the thing is, they started like really, like just laxing on training. So there was a lot of new people who just weren't trained properly, and out of no fault of their own, they just didn't know what to do on the floor. And there was this one time where it was just me and like 2 brand new people, and they couldn't really help me at all. And I was like and then the other shift supervisor had to go and do their tasks before like a certain time for like inventory, I think. And it was just me and these 2 people on the floor. That's it. And I was running around everywhere, answering people while making beverages, while running back to the oven. And I just felt like I was like a hamster on a wheel. Like I just felt like, or in a maze. It was so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't care. They don't care how severely short staffed you are. They don't care. Like they don't care who's there, who's not trained. They just care about like when is like how much profit are you making, how many customers did you take that day. There was just one day where there was our store was, I think, at like 85 degrees, 90 degrees, because the heating stopped work. I mean, the AC stopped working and it was so hot, but we were still there. One time it was so cold that the doors broke, and we still, like, I wasn't there that day, but my coworkers who had to be there had to shovel all the snow. The door was broken and they had to keep working with like heavy parkas on. Like, they just don't care.
Wow. I think that you know, I think they've definitely gone like downhill. I remember like, because the training for Starbucks, for people who don't know, the training for Starbucks was actually pretty intense. Like we had this book and you had to go through that entire book and you had to know how to make all of those drinks. Like there was no, okay, you figure this out as you go along. Like we had to know how to make all of those drinks and then we had to make them in a certain amount of minutes. At least that's how it was back then. But at my location, we were actually trained by the district manager. That could be the big difference. I don't know, but it's, you have to know them and you have to be able to make them quickly because the customers, the line will increase and it does get pretty long. And a lot of times if you're working that morning shift, people are coming there and they just want to grab their coffee and go, like they're on their way to work. So you don't really have time to stall per se. I'm wondering how it is now with the app. Because I know now some people, they'll place the order on the app and then they'll come there and expect it to be ready. I'm pretty sure that can be kind of chaotic too.
Oh yeah, it's very crazy with the app, because not only are you having to accommodate to the people who are inside the store and like trying to prioritize them, but also trying to prioritize these mobile orders, and you're just like, you just have to be able to multitask and switch between each bar. And you're supposed to have two people on bar, but like sometimes we're just too understaffed to have two people there. And if one person, or like if there's like four of us or three of us, like even if like one person is on, if someone even is on bar to help out the people with the mobile order apps,
Mm-hmm.
but the mobile order drinks, they still have to eventually get off to go in, like, because that was my role, was to flex in and out. So if they needed help, I would have to go. But once they're done needing help, I had to leave. And then I had to wait for them to be so, like, just inundated with all these drinks to help again. It was very stressful.
Yeah, it's very, I remember we had one person was on the cold drinks. So they would do like the Frappuccinos and the iced teas, and then one person on the hot drinks. And then we had a cashier. So we had three people back there. So that's why I tell people, like when you add something to the mix, like adding a mobile app, and you have all these orders coming in that you have to make these. And the other thing too, sometimes people would show up, and I would see this when I was in line, like back when I used to drink coffee. I would see people show up to get their drinks. They had ordered it on the mobile app. And then some people would not be happy because they're like, my drink isn't hot anymore. And I'm like, well, that's the chance that you take when you order a drink on a mobile app. I'm sorry, but what
Yeah.
do you expect?
Or like people will be really upset that their cappuccinos aren't like filled all the way to the top because it's just foam.
Yep.
But if
Yep.
you make it sit there for too long, the foam starts, disappearing. And so they think we only gave them half a cup. And it's like, no, you guys just came in very late. I'm so sorry about that. I'll remake it. But people get upset. And then sometimes, like, because you have to leave the cups out, people will take the wrong drinks and they'll take someone else's, and you have to remake that and stop what you're doing. And I mean, some people are just, I guess, in go mode and think they just grab whatever and then they come back. But yeah, all of that stuff, like, you have to be able to just multitask if you're the person on bar or anywhere, really.
And sometimes the customer, so in that sense, they may want you to be a babysitter. They may want someone to actually sit there and watch those drinks to make sure the person that's coming up to get the drink is getting the right drink. No one has time for that. Like really, like, it's just, it's a lot that's expected of you. If anyone has ever worked a customer service job, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of the customers can be very chill, and then some of them can be a little anal, like, to be honest. And you have to deal with all of that, and the fact that you guys were trying to start a union as well. And obviously you have a supervisor here who is docking people's like time. I don't understand how that's even, I don't understand how that was even allowed. I don't understand why she would still be allowed to remain there, because at some point or another, you would think people who are higher up that actually track like the hours, you would think that they would step in and see, why is she having to continue to go into the system to continue to make all these adjustments on people's time?
Yeah, that was by the time I left Starbucks, I was on manager number 9. So that was my first manager. That manager ended up getting promoted and then ended up leaving the company sometime later. It makes no sense, but this last manager, I just so I didn't work with that manager for more than I think a year. But yeah, she ended up getting promoted, and like there's a lot of things that just go like a manager will do something that's like not okay, and then like it'll just get swept under the rug because they don't want to deal with it. And like I've complained several times about like certain people or like certain managers or the way they run things, and I'm like, I don't really want you guys to, like, I don't care about anyone getting in trouble. I just want the situation fixed, like,
right?
Because it does me like, knowing that she got written up has no, like, I don't care. Like, that doesn't help me.
Right.
Fix the situations, and then, like, that's what will help everyone else. But that's not something they like listening to. Mm-hmm. So obviously, it didn't really work. They just didn't listen to me. And then, like, knowing what a union was, just like solidifying the ideas that I wish had like existed. Like, not, it's kind of like weird how I think like I had to wait until I was like 27 to really know what a union was, besides what I learned in school. So so that was really, I don't know, I guess really interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a part of a union. I mean, my parents have talked about unions before, but I was never a part of a union. It just wasn't even a thing. Like, I think for a lot of people, like in my generation, but I think that, this speaks volumes to all of the stores that are unionizing, or at least trying to unionize. I'm curious, what advice would you give to the other Starbucks stores who are thinking about trying to unionize after your experience?
So all I have to say is just like be very, I guess, headstrong. Just don't let them like talk you down. And I guess it's a very, I guess it can be a very intense situation that you think might arise, but just keep going. Like, this is a fight for not only like yourself, but it's a fight for everyone you work with. And the only thing that could happen with a union is a good thing. Like, you guys have a voice this way. You guys have like a way to hold companies accountable the same way they try to hold you accountable for like not being in dress code, like for ridiculous things that can be fixed. But like, if they were just like, it is also just a way to hold them accountable to safety standards, and have a livable wage, and just, be happy within your workplace, and or continue to be happy within your workplace. And yeah, I mean, like, Starbucks was a happy time for a long time for me, but also there were these things I just didn't always agree with. So you're fighting for your workplace.
That's right. That's right. Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm not sure if you're on socials, but if so, like, where can people find you?
I'm not that big on social media. I think I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is J Chukianki, and then a 0 at the end. But yeah, I probably should be more active on socials.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jocelyn, and best wishes and good luck to you and to everybody else that's out there trying to fight the good fight.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, guys, really quick, one thing I want to say, I'm gonna go to some of the comments here in just a second, show you guys the thumbnail, shout out patrons, and we'll get to our other 2 news stories here. There was something that Jocelyn said that I just thought about, and I think this is important for people to really take in. You guys will have to excuse me. I'm a little stuffy tonight. Most of the time when an employee complains about some type of treatment, whether it's the manager changing their time stamps, most of the time the employee, they just want the situation resolved. Most of the time, the employee is not complaining because they want management to get in trouble. They just want the problem fixed. So I'm glad that she mentioned that. That's something, you put that out there into the ether. Let people know about that, because a lot of times I think management, they feel like they're being tattled on or whatever. And usually that is not the case. Usually the employee just wants the situation resolved. And if they've already spoken to the manager about it and it's not resolved, then they go higher up. That's how it goes. All righty. Quick shout out to Sabby patrons in the house. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Kudos. All of their names are listed here. If you're interested in being a patron, why is this so large? Okay. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and the ultimate. That's right. All of their names are here, guys. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. Thank you guys so much. I know I need to format this better. I'll get around to it. I got a lot going on. Thanks. It really does help me out. Okay. What are we going to talk about tonight, you guys? Let's go ahead and share my thumbnail here. All right. Tonight, we're discussing Joe Rogan exposes Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, I have so much to say about that, you guys. We're going to get into this whole censorship issue here. And we're also going to discuss Roger Waters listed. They're coming after Roger Waters now. I told you guys it was only a matter of time. We're going to get into that as well. And of course, Jocelyn was the Starbucks worker that was just fired. She just joined us here. So got a lot to chat about. Or at least I have a lot to say. Let's just put it that way. I have a lot to say. I'm going to go to some of the comments first. Thank you for that, Eric. JB says, I can't tell you how many of us cooks in restaurants go into work sick because we don't have sick days in healthcare. Yep. I remember like when I was waiting tables, I remember there were times like we'd still wait tables if we were sick, just because if you don't come in that night and wait table, you don't get paid. There was no sick pay. So Diagoro, Sabrina, do you always work backward from the way you have things listed as the topic on your vids? Starting to see a pattern like that. And I just want to know that I'm not going crazy. LOL. Yeah. So typically, the interviews are usually first. It depends, though. It depends on their availability. Sometimes people come in at like 8:30. Sometimes they come in at 8. So it all depends where the interview availability lines up. But I see you watching me, Diagoro. Roman says Citizens United didn't unite any citizens. No. Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. Rents are too damn high and paychecks are too damn low. $45 minimum wage. I actually think that's what Professor Wolf said it should be. Like last time I talked to him, I think that's what he said. Brandy said, but yes, like Sabby said, most HR major responsibility is to protect the company, not the workers, which is why my hubs doesn't work in that field and stayed with the university after he graduated. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, HR is not your friend. HR is there to protect the company. They will tell you that they are there for you to protect the employees, but they are actually there to protect the company. That's how that works. Thank you for the super chat, Lord Marsh. I used to work at McDonald's making minimum wage. You know what that means when someone pays you minimum wage? You know what your boss was trying to say? If I could pay you less, I would, but it's against the law. Chris Rock. That's a good point. That is a good point. Lee Ford said, I won't drink Starbucks after this show. Thank you for the eye opener. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I was at Starbucks, to be honest. Thank you for the super sticker, JM. Gamer says, thanks for having Jocelyn on, Sabby. Anytime. Betsy with 2 E's said, Sabby, there should be a podcaster union, except on second thought, RBN should be a co-op. Oh, Betsy, here you come with the ideas. I'm thinking the wheels are turning, Betsy. They're turning up here. Thank you for the super chat, Stacy. And thank you for keeping the topics alive that interest Leroy and I. Have a happy Friday. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the super chat, Andrew. While it's not healthy, Kyle did a video arguing Dark Brandon is better than Obama. Absolutely depressing seeing Kyle, Crystal, and Sauger now. Yeah, I don't even watch that. I don't even watch it, to be honest. I haven't seen those shows in a long time. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our first story here. We need to talk about what's happening with Roger Waters now. I'm going to show you this clip here. I talked about this interview when it happened, but something has happened after this interview, and we're going to get into that as well. But I do just want to take a step back and just remind you why people are coming after Roger Waters now. So just to jog your memory, Roger Waters had an interview with CNN, and the topic of Russia and Ukraine came up along with other issues of Joe Biden's presidency. Roger basically said things that we say here on independent media, and we would probably not be invited on CNN to say. Just keeping it real. But shout out to Roger Waters for this. I'm going to play this, and then we're going to get into the story about what they're doing to Roger Waters now. So here we go.
Yeah. Well, he's fueling the fire in the Ukraine for a start. That is a huge crime. Why won't the United States of America encourage Zelensky, the president, to negotiate, obviating the need for this horrendous war that's killing.
You're blaming.
We don't know how many Ukrainians.
But you're blaming the party that got invaded. Come on, you've got it reversed.
That's you know, any war. When did it start? What you need to do is look at the history, and you can say, well, it started on this day. You could say it started in 2008. Okay, this war is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do when Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe.
When you say this, then I have to say, what about our role as liberators? You of all people.
You have no role as liberators.
World War II? World War II?
You got into World War II because
Come on.
Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. You were completely isolationist until that sad, that devastating,
I would argue we were
day
always going to get in, and that pushed us in. But thank God the United States got in, right? You lost your father in World War II. Thank God the United States.
But thank God the Russians.
See how the commentator is trying to make it personal for Roger here and remind him that, well, you lost your father in World War II. That's a little trick that they I mean, I think good journalists, really good ones, wouldn't do that. You're kind of supposed to not go down that road, just to be honest with you. But that's kind of like a little sneaky, him bringing up a personal issue to try to get him to change his mind. And I don't like that. I don't like when journalists do that, but it didn't work on Roger Waters. So
had already won the bloody war almost by then. Don't forget, 23 million Russians died protecting you and me from the Nazi menace.
Hey, and you would think the Russians would have learned their lesson from war and wouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Well, you
Fair?
with all your reading, I would suggest to you Michael, that you go away and read a bit more and then try and figure out what the United States would do if the Chinese were putting nuclear-armed missiles into Mexico and Canada.
The Chinese are too busy encircling Taiwan as we speak. Okay?
They're not encircling Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China. And that's been absolutely accepted by the whole of the international community since 1948. And if you don't know that, you're not reading enough. Go and read about it.
Okay. Did we solve anything here today?
No. Well, yeah, we did. Well, I mean, no, we didn't. Because you're believing your propaganda, your side's propaganda.
You're defining it as
Taiwan,
propaganda.
you can't have a conversation about human rights, and you can't have a conversation about Taiwan without actually doing the reading.
Roger, if you're having a conversation about human rights, at the top of the list of offenders are the Chinese. Why is it always the Western world?
The top of your list.
Why is it
the
always
Chinese
the Western
didn't
world?
invade Iraq and kill 1 million people in 2003. In fact, as far as I can recall, hang on a minute, who have the Chinese invaded and murdered, slaughtered?
Their own.
Bollocks.
Okay.
That's absolute nonsense. Complete nonsense.
I like that when people say bollocks. I like that word. Notice how Smirkonish frames it, like the framing that he has when he talks about the other groups. It's the Russians, it's the Chinese. I don't like the framing. I don't like when people say it that way. Is like, listen, a lot of this fear mongering about people who are from Russia, people who are from China, I really don't like it. And the United States has done this for a long time. Now, it may not always be the same country, although they've been saying this about Russia for a long time. But it's always something, it's a lot of fear that they try to like instill in people. And the way Smirkonish said it to me is typical narrative that you hear from mainstream media. And Roger Waters called him on his bullshit. A lot of people saw this interview.
You should go away and read, but read some proper.
Hey, my
literature.
problem is I spend too much time reading your liner notes, okay? Thank you for doing this.
Thank
I appreciate
you
it.
for talking to me.
All right.
It's always a pleasure.
Okay, so that happened. How many people saw this interview? Okay, over 879,000 people saw that on YouTube. I don't know how many people actually saw it on CNN, but that's still a lot of people, obviously, right? So some people didn't like this. And now they have continued to move forward and add Roger Waters to a list. I kid you not. Let's get into it. Let's go on. Roger Waters added to Ukrainian hit list. Pink Floyd star declared enemy of Ukraine. Isn't this something, you guys? Like, I can't even make this up. This is what happens. Okay, so we're going to actually start right about here, because that's talking about war part. I have to be careful what I say on here. I just want to get to the Roger part. Okay. So apparently there is this website where they have people who they consider to be not, I guess, making the correct narrative or the narrative that they want to hear in reference to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. And I cannot read this. I'm sorry. I don't know that language. But this is actually Roger Waters' profile on this site. So you can see here, there's a picture of him. And it goes on to say the co-founder of Pink Floyd is known for his support of imprisoned creator Julian Assange and for his opposition to imperialism and war, as well as for his awesome music, loved by millions around the world. Waters recently referred to Joe Biden as a war criminal on CNN and said that Biden is fueling the fire in Ukraine. This war, the musician said, is basically about the action and reaction of NATO pushing right up to the Russian border, which they promised they wouldn't do Gorbachev negotiated the withdrawal of the USSR from the whole of Eastern Europe. Waters has also said that Crimea belongs to Russia because the majority of the people living on the peninsula are Russian. The rock star's views have outraged the pro-NATO crowd and their Nazi friends, as well as the social justice warriors who froth at the mouth in support of whatever the mainstream media declares to be the current thing. Let me highlight this for just a second, because I want to elaborate a little bit more on this. As well as the social justice warriors who froth at the mouth in support of whatever the mainstream media declares to be the current thing. This happens a lot. If you ever notice, you watch people and you notice, hey, their talking points are starting to change. Hey, last year they said this. A couple of months ago, they said they were against this. Now they're all for it. Those are those types of people. They do that on purpose. It works well for the algorithm. If you're an independent media, it works well for the algorithm. And it's usually things that are trending. Beware of people like that. Beware of the people who always seem to be in support of something that is actually the new thing that mainstream media tells you should be in support of. You should be cautious of people like that. Now we're going to go on here to say Waters, who has always been something of a dissident and anti-war, the way all rock stars used to be when rock and roll was still real, is attacked mercilessly by the woke crowd who are intolerant of all who are not in lockstep with their views. So you'll see here. Let me go down. Here's an example. Old rocker off his rocker. Fans slam Roger Waters and tell him to stick to what you're good at as they threaten to sell their tickets to his This Is Not a Drill tour after he branded Biden a war criminal over Ukraine. Guys, I've seen this happen before in my life. It wasn't with Roger Waters. It was with a group called the Dixie Chicks. Some of you in the chat may be old enough to remember this. The Dixie Chicks, they were a country music group, band, whatever you want to call it these days. They were extremely popular at the time. The war in Iraq started. The Dixie Chicks spoke out against the war in Iraq. They also spoke out against President Bush. And in the world of country music, that was a no-no. They were also from his state, Texas. They spoke out at a time when it was not considered cool to do so. Till this day, I still say, if there is one group in particular or person in particular that I remember actually being canceled, it's the Dixie Chicks. Because after them voicing their views, they were canceled. And when I say canceled, I mean they couldn't book any venues for shows. They couldn't sell tickets at the ones that they were able to get. Their music career was pretty much done. Like, people were burning their CDs. That's right, Rain. They were blacklisted. That's right. Like, so when people say that like Dave Chappelle is canceled, no. I've seen canceled. So the Dixie Chicks, honestly, they weren't able to get like gigs or like these venues. They weren't able to further their career musically for about 10 years. So those mofos were canceled. Roger Waters is not cancels just yet, but this quote here where they're saying stick to what you are good at, that was the same kind of quotes that they were saying to the Dixie Chicks when they spoke out against the war in Iraq. They were told to shut up and sing. They were told to stick to what you're good at. And you know what's really bad? One of their own comrades in country music, Mr. Toby Keith, he was one of the ones who criticized them. You would think the musicians would want to stick together, but no. So hopefully it does not go that way for Roger. But I had to bring up that example because that's exactly, I heard that and I was like, oh, that reminds me of the Dixie Chicks. Yeah. Let's go back in. Okay. So that's one quote. Here's another from a Washington Post article. Pink Floyd's Roger Waters is accused of anti-Semitism ahead of DC concerts. That was actually from 2017, but they're pulling up different examples. So it goes on to say here, this is about the website. An investigation by the Russian Foundation to Battle Injustice reveals the names of the individuals, corporations, and government entities which are believed to be the organizers, sponsors, and curators of the Ukrainian national website. It says that, and I do not know how to pronounce this, I apologize, guys, but Mirovorets, while it's easily accessible to anyone who likes that sort of thing, this Russian human rights organization is blocked on major social media platforms like Facebook. And here's another example of it here. Investigators say that the hit list, which was created in 2014, is supervised by the public organization Mirovorets Center, which is headed by Roman Zaitsev, a former employee of Ukrainian Special Services, and by the public organization People's Rear, headed by George Tuka, a Ukrainian statesman and public figure. The site is also controlled by the Security Service of Ukraine and was created on the initiative of Anton Gerashenko, the advisor of Ukrainian's Minister of Internal Affairs. Gerashenko faces charges of terrorism in the Russian Federation for his creation of the hit list. Now, and that's him right there. When I tell you guys that they were coming after certain types of people, like I was not kidding. And now they have, this website apparently, and they've added Roger Waters to this list. I'm not sure if anyone else has spoken about this. I'm not sure if Roger Waters knows about this. I'll just be honest with you, but they're now going after people like him. So at first it was the journalists, the independent journalists, investigative journalists that have been speaking the way that they have been speaking. I have to be careful the way I say it on here as well. And now musician. Now this came out after that interview I just showed you. One more piece that I want to show you here as well. This is an example. Go down here. The U.S. State Department confirmed that the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs was connected to the website and acknowledged the publication of the journalist's personal data, but the U.S. government has taken no action to block the website. So it's not blocked, FYI, guys. Although many Russian websites and alternative news media may have been blocked by social media giants for publishing information about the war in Ukraine, which does not line up with official narratives. You see this part right here? Remember what happened to Jackson Hinkle? See that? Although many Russian websites and alternative news media have been blocked by social media giants for publishing information about the war in Ukraine that does not line up with the official narrative. That's what people have been experiencing, especially people in independent media, more so. So this piece here doesn't show as much as I wanted to show. But it goes on to say an analysis of the site's network protocol by the Foundation to Battle Injustice found that the databases used for the technological services of a company in California And if you look at the main page, you will see the address, Langley County, Virginia. There are posts on the site from accounts which have names of Western intelligence agencies. And here's all the alphabet groups here. So that is, I don't want to say I'm surprised because I'm not surprised, but I will say, you know, I'm glad this information is getting out to more people now, because we've talked about this before on RBN that these alphabet letter groups, they are very much infiltrated in all of this, whether it's social media, whether it's platforms like YouTube, Google, they're all, and we're going to get into that when we get into the next story, because you're going to hear that too as well. They're very much infiltrated into it. So you really have to be careful. Like, you really just don't know. But long story short, unfortunately, Roger Waters has now been added to this list. Crazy, isn't it? Does this make you want to listen to Pink Floyd? I don't know. Sometimes I think people hear this and they're like, oh, I think I'm going to listen to Pink Floyd. Crazy, huh? I told you they were coming after everybody, not just journalists. They were going to start coming after anybody who spoke out against the mainstream narrative. And we're going to get into more of that in just a second. I want to go to some of the comments, and then we're going to get into the story about Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg, where they go even deeper into that. So, shout out to AJF Milan for the super chat. No, Citizens United unites the upper class citizens, not the whole citizens folks. That's a good point. Hypnicity. New subscriber. I love Roger. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for the super chat, CEB Applejack 59. They tried to call Joe Rogan CNN for millennials. Did they say that? That's funny. Oh, man. Thank you for the super chat as well, AJF. Well, thing is, we in the U.S. have Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Congo, Pakistan, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Colombia, et cetera, of varying interference, but yet the West reacts only when Russia invades. Peculiar. I wonder why. Thank you for this super chat as well, CEB. FYI, Biden is a war crim. Here you go. Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Roger Waters' net worth is $310 million. He'll be all right. Thank you for the super chat, Nima. Eminem spoke out against the Iraq war as well. Didn't seem to damage him. I believe when he did that, because I know that album, The Eminem Show, as well. There's a lot of, actually, most of the songs, I think in most of the songs on that album, it's mentioned in some way, shape, or form in reference to the war. If I remember correctly, I think Eminem did that after. By that time, like, other rappers were doing that too. It wasn't just him. But I think, you know, part of it could be the fact that he was a rapper, so it's different. They were in country music. Country music tends to be more conservative. I don't know if that had an impact as well, you know? Thank you for the super chat, Macharius39. Claire Daly, MEP for the EU, is on that hit list. That wouldn't surprise me either. And thank you for the super sticker, JM. Thanks so much. Okay. We're going to get into this conversation here with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg, because Mark Zuckerberg, you know, he kind of said the quiet part out loud, kind of spilled the beans. Then we're sitting here and we're talking about censorship and what narrative is acceptable or not. And Mark Zuckerberg, during this interview, is going to give a little bit too much away. A little bit too much. So we're going to go through this, and then we're going to go to another clip from Second Thought that actually explains a little bit more how the censorship process works when it comes to companies like Google and Facebook, etc. So let's go ahead and get started with this.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
When we take down something that we're not supposed to, I mean, that is like, I mean, that's the worst. I mean,
how
that's
do you
like
discern? Like how, like say, like these Christian Facebook pages. I don't know how they found out that 19 of 20 were fake, but if someone just says I am Bob Smith and they post as Bob Smith and they have a photograph but really what they're doing is trying to talk shit about Joe Biden and get people to vote Republican in the midterms. Like how do you know whether someone's real or not? Like this is the big argument with Elon and Twitter. Because Elon asked Twitter, like, what percentage of your website is filled with bots? And they say 5%. And he says, I don't believe you. I think it's higher. And let's find out how you've come to this conclusion.
Yeah.
And, you know, I believe they said that they just took 100 random Twitter pages and looked at the interaction. And there's some sort of an algorithm they applied to it. But how do you discern?
Okay, before he answers that question, I want you to look at the look on Mark Zuckerberg's face. Okay. It's not perfect. They don't always get it right. And sometimes, you know, I have my opinion of why that happens. But, you know, you have to be careful with the bots. Like they pick up things sometimes that actually is not in violation, but it'll pick it up just because it thinks that it is. And so this is why you really can't rely. You can't rely on that. Every numerous times I've come onto this show and I've told you guys, Hardlands Media, you know, is going through this issue. I don't want to get too far into it because of, I'd be careful what I say, but they were always able to appeal it and it was overturned every time. That just goes to show you how bad and misleading the bots can be sometimes. But I'm going to let Mark go ahead and kind of throw himself under the bus here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think estimating the overall prevalence is one thing. But I think that the question of looking at a page and is this page authentic? I think that there's a bunch of signals around that. One of the things that we try to do is for large pages, we try to make sure that we know who the admin of that page is. We don't necessarily, you should be able to run an anonymous page. You don't necessarily need to out yourself and say who you are running it, but we want to make sure that we sort of have like an identity for that person on file, so that way we know, like at least behind the scenes, that that person is real. For certain political things, I think having a sense.
I call BS on that because it's not always necessarily about whether or not someone's real. It's more so about what is the narrative that they're telling and does that fit what's acceptable to the alphabet group organizations. That's more so what it's about. I'll be honest with you. There are multiple pages on Facebook that I know for damn sure are not real, but they're there. So of course he's going to lead with that to make it seem like, hey, what we're doing was not that bad. We're not really trying to censor people or anything like that, but they are. Let's let them go on.
Of what country they're originating from. I mean, some of that you can do just by looking at where their server traffic comes from, like is the IP address coming from Romania because if it's like an ad in some other country's election, then you probably want to make sure that that ad is especially in countries that have laws around that, are coming from someone who's a valid citizen or like at least in that place. So there's a bunch of, I think, I don't know, one theme in my worldview around this stuff, when it gets to some of the stuff that we talked about before, is like, I don't think that this stuff is black and white or that you're ever going to have like a perfect AI system. I think it's all trade-offs all the way down, right? And you could build a system and you can either be overly aggressive and capture a higher percent of the bad guys, but then also by accident take out some number of good guys, or you could be a little more lenient and say, okay, no, the cost of taking out any number of good guys is too high, so we're going to tolerate having just a little bit more more bad guys on the system.
Sounds like it's all over the place to me. And it's interesting. Look at the look on his face. Look, you can tell he's kind of fishing here a little bit. He doesn't seem comfortable answering this question. And also, I just want to go on and say, too, that it's kind of interesting to me how he says bad guys and good guys. Like, what determines necessarily on social media if you're a bad guy or a good guy per se. So what? You have a page and maybe it's not actually your name. Many of people I see on Facebook don't use their real name. Does that make them a bad guy? No, I don't think this is war per se, good guy, bad guy. I don't think this is team sports here where you have good guy, bad guy. I think he's kind of fishing for what to say. And you can tell by the look on his face, it's just like, okay, how am I going to answer this question and not make it as obvious that, yeah, we are taking away certain types of information because we're told to do so. And he doesn't even, get all the way there because he ends up giving things away.
These are values questions, right? Around what do you value more? And those are super tricky questions. And part of what I've struggled with around this is I didn't get into this to basically judge those things. I got into this to design technology that helps people connect, right? It's like, and like, you could probably tell when we spent the first hour talking about the metaverse and the future of basically building this whole technology roadmap to basically give people this realistic sense of presence. It's like, that's what I'm here to do, right? So this whole thing that's like arbitrating what is okay and what is not, I obviously have to be involved in that because this is at some level, I run the company and I can't just abdicate that. But I also don't think that as a matter of governance, you want all of that decision making vested in one individual. So I think one of the things that our country and our government gets right is the separation of powers.
Here we go. See, yeah. He probably didn't get into this to have to worry about what people are saying, what people are putting on there, but somebody told him to, and that's the US government. That's what this is about. Again, he looks so nervous, uncomfortable in this interview, but he's giving a lot away here. We're going to go back into it really quick, guys. Go ahead and do a like if you haven't had a chance to do so. That really helps me out with the algorithm. Hit that like button, hawk smash it. Let's go back in.
So, one of the things that I tried to create is we created this oversight board. It's an independent board that basically we appointed people whose kind of paramount value is free expression, but they also balance that with things like when is there going to be real harm to others in terms of safety or privacy or other human rights issues. And basically that board, people in our community can appeal cases to when they think that we got it wrong, and that board actually gets to make the final binding decision, not us. So in a way,
it's always funny to me when they say independent boards, because I never believe that they're independent. I never believe they're independent. I'm sorry. It's just, I don't know. I don't buy it.
I actually think that is a more legitimate form of governance than having just a team internally that makes these decisions, or maybe some of them go up to me, although I don't spend a ton of my time on this on a day-to-day basis. But like, I think it's generally good to have some kind of separation of powers where you're architecting the governance so that way you have different stakeholders and different people who can make these decisions, and it's not just like one private company that's making decisions even about what just happens on our platform.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
We have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is,
you heard what he just said, right? Like he just let that all out. Cat out of the bag. He said, yeah, so the FBI came to us. I'm like, what? Wait, what? I told you all of these groups were working together. All of them. The alphabet letter groups and social media, all of the platforms, they're all working together. That's who's really controlling the information.
They said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have, if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it.
Let's hear this again, because this proves my point about suppression. Listen to this, guys.
Important misinformation. We also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less.
The ranking in the news feed was a little bit less. This is how they suppress content. It's not just Facebook that does it. YouTube does it. This is how they suppress people. They rank it lower so that it has less of a chance coming across more people. So more eyes don't get on it. You see, he just let the cat out the bag. Now, this is something that we've been kind of feeling for a while, but he just kind of told everyone. He let it all out. Now, what was interesting is he said, well, people could still share it, but it wouldn't come up in people's news feed as much because we ranked it lower. And then here's the question that I have. If people were still allowed to share it and more people are sharing it, right? How is it still not coming up in the news feed? Because typically the way it works with the algorithm is the more people share, the more people hit that like button with Facebook and with YouTube. Both of them do it this way. The more eyes it will get. And what he is telling you is that behind the scenes, they have made it so that even if a lot of people were to share it, a lot of people won't see it. That's what they did. Suppression like a mofo. What'd I tell you? We told you guys this was happening. Suppression like a mofo. Literally, if you think about it, I mean, I have, what am I now? I'm somewhat over, I'm 20 something K subs, right? Okay. So, and it's an election year, right? Midterm year. If it had been probably about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, those of us at RBN, we would have way more subs than we do right now. Way more. That's how much they're suppressing it. And I know it because when a lot of you, when you're new, you're like, holy crap, I didn't know about this channel. So we know we're not coming up. See what they're doing? Let's let him bury himself even more.
So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely...
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper political issue. So depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's a very professional law enforcement, if they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Did they specifically say you need to be?
Long story short, they suppressed the laptop story. Most people that I spoke to, especially people that don't watch independent media, didn't even know about it. Didn't even know that it was a thing.
On guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
When something like that turns out to be real, is there regret for not having it evenly distributed and for throttling the distribution of that story?
What do you mean evenly distributed?
I mean evenly in that it's not suppressed. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it turned out after the fact. I mean, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false, right? So basically, it had this period where it was getting list distribution. So yeah. I mean, but I think I think it sucks though. I think in the same way that probably having to go through like a criminal trial but being proven innocent in the end sucks. Like, it still sucks to have like that you had to go through a criminal trial, but at the end you're free. So it's I don't know if the answer would have been don't do anything or don't have any process. I think the process was pretty reasonable.
This is not a criminal trial. This is nothing like a criminal trial. But they are indeed, basically, he's saying that they're playing judge and jury. Basically. That's what he just compared it to, a criminal trial. Mark, I hope, look, if you ever do something dirty behind the scenes, Mark, don't ever do anything dirty behind the scenes. In your life, don't do anything dirty behind the scenes, because you would be a big red flag. We can see right through you. You look very nervous and uncomfortable. So just play it straight and narrow. Don't do anything that you shouldn't do, because you would give yourself away.
We still let people share it, but obviously you don't want situations like that.
But certainly much more reasonable than Twitter's stance. And it's probably also the case of armchair quarterbacking, right? Or at least Monday morning quarterbacking, I should say. Because in the moment, you had reason to believe, based on the FBI talking to you, that it wasn't real and that there was going to be some propaganda. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And then if you just let it get out there, and what if it changes the election and it turns out to be bullshit? That's a real problem. And I would imagine that those kind of decisions are the most difficult. The decisions of like what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Yeah. I mean, what would you do in that situation?
I don't know what I would do. I would have to like really thoroughly. Well, first of all, you're dealing with the New York Post, which is one of the oldest newspapers in the country.
Joe, come on. You have to know what you would do. You see how they tried to censor you. You see how Spotify tried to censor you. Like, I can't believe I'm surprised he's saying he doesn't know what he would. Come on. I don't know. I don't know. No defense for Mark Zuckerberg on this, though. No defense. I'm not defending him at all. I think it's BS. You are basically censoring information, and it's really ridiculous that like you can't even control your own platform now. This is what has happened. You have no control over your own platform. I want to make sure everybody understands that. Even though he created it, he is letting you know now he has no control over his own platform. That's not a good feeling.
So I would say I would want to talk to someone from the New York Post, and I would say, how did you come up with this data? Like, where are you getting the information from? How do you know whether or not this is correct? And then you have to make a decision, because they might have got duped. It's hard because everybody wants to look at it after the fact. Now that we know that the laptop was real and then it was a legitimate story and there is potential corruption involved with him, what we think, that should not have been restricted, that should not have been banned from sharing on Twitter.
I always thought it was real. I always thought that story was real. I was not one of those people that's like, I don't believe that. I was like, no, I believe it. I'm sorry. I put nothing past Joe Biden. I put nothing past Hunter Biden. I don't care if you're president. I don't care if you're a congressman. I don't care if you're a senator. Actually, that might make me even more suspicious of you. That does not put That basically does not put you past like doing anything that you're not supposed to do. Politicians are known for being corrupt. So I actually did believe it. That's just me. Sorry, but can't give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Right. I think everybody agrees with that. Even Twitter agrees with that. But the thing is, then they didn't think that. In the beginning, they thought it was fake. So what do? Like, if something comes along and the Republicans cook up some scheme to make it look like Joe Biden's a terrible person, and they only do it so that they can win the election, but it's really just propaganda. What are you supposed to do with that? You're supposed to not allow that to be distributed. So if they think that's the case, it makes sense to me that they would try to stop it. But I just don't think that they looked at it hard enough.
I think that Joe and Mark here are they're being a little too nice about the FBI. I'm sorry. Let's remember the group we're talking about here, the organization, right? The same organization that went after MLK, the same organization that went after Malcolm X, the same organization that recently just went after the Black Socialist group, the Uhuru group. Why would you trust anything they say? I don't trust it. I'm sorry, but I guess I don't know. They kind of sound a little naive here. I don't know if that's just for show. I don't know what it is. I don't know if maybe they just can't say certain things. I don't know, but I don't know. I was raised never to trust them. And because of the people that I just told you about, because of people like MLK, because of people like Malcolm X, because of the way that they came after people like Fred Hampton, I was raised, don't you ever trust them. So I think they're giving the FBI a little too much leeway here. No, I don't put anything past them. You can't trust them.
When the New York Post is talking about it, you know, they're pretty smart about what they release and what they don't release. If they're going over some data from a laptop and you could talk to a person, but again, like this is just one story, like one individual story. Like how many of these pop up every day, especially in regards to polarizing issues like climate change or COVID or you know, foreign policy or Ukraine. Anytime there's like a really controversial issue where some people think that it's imperative that you take a very specific stance and you can't have the other stance. Mm-hmm. Like those moments on social media, those trouble a lot of people because they don't know why certain things get censored or certain things get promoted.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's like to be in your spot. And I was one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about is this, because like to be in your spot must be insanely difficult to have. No matter what decision you make, you're going to have a giant chunk of people that are upset at you. And there might be a right way to handle it, but I don't know what the fuck right way is.
Well, I think the right way is to establish principles for governance that try to be balanced and not have the decision making too centralized. Because
this just sounds cop-like to me. Like, no, like I'm not going to play the whole interview. I'm going to let him finish here, and then I'm going to show you what Second Thought has to say about this whole censorship thing. By the way, if you don't follow Second Thought on YouTube, I highly recommend that you do. He does really good videos, but this just sounds cop-like to me. Like, I don't understand what is it. I envy your position because of the situation you're in. I don't want to be in that situation. Mark is all right. Mark's a billionaire. He's going to be okay. But I mean, the thing is this is like, no, I feel like they would snitch on me right now. Like I feel like if I was sitting at a table across from Mark Zuckerberg, I feel like he would snitch. That's the impression I'm getting right now. I can't. No.
I think that it's hard for people to accept that like some team at Meta or that I personally am making all these decisions. And I think people should be skeptical about so much concentration around that. So that's why a lot of the innovation that I've tried to push for in governance is around things like establishing this oversight board. So that way you have people who are luminaries around expression from all over the world, but also in the U.S. Folks like Michael McConnell, who's is a Stanford professor, who's like he was I forget which Republican president appointed him, but he was I think going to be considered for the Supreme Court at some point. He's a very very prominent and kind of celebrated free expression advocate, and he helped me set the thing up. And
oh, surprise! What do you know? The free expression advocate is the one who helped him set it up.
I think like setting up forms of governance around that are independent of us, that basically get the final say on a bunch of these decisions, and that's a step in the right direction.
No, it's not, because those independent of us groups that he's talking about, if the organizations of the alphabet letter group are following Facebook, what the hell makes you think that they're not following that independent group, Mark? You think that group is off the table, that's off limits? They can't touch them. They can't follow them. Are you kidding me? I can't. Bye, Mark. I really again, I feel like he sounds so gullible. That is going to be the discussion tonight for the call-in segment, FYI. I want to hear from you guys. We need to talk about that. But I want you to hear what Second Thought has to say about a lot of this, because he breaks this down in a different way about the censorship and the media. More so, the internet. The name of this video is called Censorship and the Future of the Internet, and it's by Second Thought. And shout out to JB, because JB is the one who actually told me about Second Thought. He's going to explain some things here that I think you need to hear.
Internet was first developed, many people had high hopes that it would become a sort of digital commons, a place where people could gather and freely exchange information, sort of like a giant public library. As we all know, that is not what became of the internet. As soon as corporations figured out just how lucrative this new frontier would be, the project was poisoned and it became just another tentacle of the modern market. In today's modern internet, all of our activity and information passes through the hands of private companies, who have final say over what is accessible, visible, and permissible on the internet. People tend to forget that Google is not some universal public utility. It's part of a giant company that exists within the internet.
Let's pause here for a second. I'm so glad he said that. Yes, Google is not a separate entity. It's not a separate thing. It's not a public utility. I think it should be a public utility. People have been arguing for that and advocating for that. But I want you to look at this picture here that he's pointing out. You'll see here's Google, and I've explained this before when I talked about politician donors. Google is a part of Alphabet Group. So there are other organizations here as well. Life Sciences, Google X, Google Ventures, Google Fiber, Nest. So it actually doesn't belong to us, you guys. So this is important for people to pay attention to.
When you're engaging with a Google property like YouTube, your right to free speech is checked at the door. Whereas your physical world is controlled by your country's government, your digital life is ruled by massive corporations and a handful of absurdly wealthy individuals. It is against the interest of these companies and billionaires to allow the free exchange of information on their platforms.
Did you just hear that? It is against the rules for those people like Susan, who is the CEO of YouTube. They just showed a picture of Mark Zuckerberg to allow for free information, free uncensored information on their platform. They can't do that. You heard what he just said?
Instead, sites like YouTube and Twitter are meticulously curated in order to mediate the conversation and most effectively monetize our traffic. YouTube tells you what to watch next, and it's always videos that will make them money. The ones from big channels, videos that are monetized and highly shareable, like, for example, the aforementioned PragerU. Same with Twitter and Facebook. You're served tailored ads and recommendations that align with what those companies want you to engage with. This is the problem in a nutshell. In a world where the internet is a necessity for most people, where our news is online, our shopping, our education, does it seem appropriate that these corporations operate almost entirely outside the control of governing bodies and the general populace? Perhaps it's time to consider a new Internet Bill of Rights to protect reasonable speech online. The internet at this point is essentially a public utility based solely on its necessity in modern life. Sites like YouTube and Facebook are essentially monopolies. There are no real alternatives, but these companies are not regulated like monopolies.
See, I'll show you the picture here. Let's pause right there just for the picture. You have YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime Video, and Vimeo, and these are the most popular video streaming services in the United States as of September 2019. And again, he told you that it basically operates like, is technically a monopoly, but doesn't operate like one.
Monopolies. There are no real alternatives, but these companies are not regulated like monopolies. Take your local water company, for example. It's a public utility, and everyone is served at the same level. If the water utility were run like Facebook, they could divert water away from undesirable areas and towards certain other areas that have somehow earned their favor in opaque ways. We're still very new to the internet, and especially social media. The World Wide Web has only really existed since 1990, and Facebook has only been around since 2004. The massive amount of transformative change that has occurred in the past 30 years has vastly outpaced our understanding of what the internet could be. By now, it should be clear that the internet will be the dominating factor of modern life for the foreseeable future, and we need to take it seriously. We need to make plans for how to ensure that the internet doesn't simply become a propaganda tool to be wielded by massive corporations that are free from oversight. Whether this means transforming the internet into a public utility or building an entirely new, unmonetized alternative to the corporate internet is up for debate. But it's certainly something we need to consider. Just as libraries serve as an effective public institution allowing for the democratization of learning, a public alternative to the internet as it currently exists could democratize the flow of information in our digital age, free from the coercion of private interests, manipulated news feeds, and targeted advertising. But to return to the issue of my CIA video for a moment, there is another factor to consider. While multi-billion-dollar corporations are the main driver of internet curation and censorship in America, many of these companies have lucrative contracts with government agencies.
Boom. What was that? Many of these companies have contracts with government agencies. There you go. Somebody call Mark Zuckerberg. You hear that?
Including the CIA. Sometimes there will be actual instances of government censorship in the United States. I believe my CIA video is one example. If YouTube would just be transparent about their reasoning for the shadow ban, I wouldn't complain. But the fact that they tried to be covert about it, then lied about the cause is alarming. The CIA and the military-industrial complex have long waged a sort of psychological campaign to manufacture consent among the American public. The Department of War became the Department of Defense. Every action the US takes abroad is in the name of national security, even when we're meddling in tiny nations that could never do anything to harm us even if they wanted to. Censorship is not simply a matter of restricting access to content critical of the status quo. It also entails promoting material that's designed to reinforce that status quo.
That's right. To promote certain material to reinforce that status quo. Keep that in mind.
Manufacture a sense of patriotism, American exceptionalism, and fear of the unknown. We need to be aware of the extent to which the powers that be are influencing the content we consume online, and that those powers are not only government agencies, but also powerful corporations that benefit from our country's warlike nature.
Yep. That's 100% true. This is why they've been going after kids on places like TikTok. They've been going after kids on places like Twitch. There's a reason why you see the ads that you see. And people wondered why I didn't like commercials growing up. I really did not like commercials.
As you know, YouTube treats its creators horribly. The shadow banning of my last video is just the most recent example. Stuff like that is why my creator friends and I teamed up to build Nebula, a streaming platform built by and for YouTubers like me, so we don't have to worry about demonetization. Since Nebula is all about creating thoughtful content, we've partnered with CuriosityStream, an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. CuriosityStream is an online streaming service with thousands.
Okay, now he's going into the other stuff that I didn't want you guys to know about. But yeah, definitely check out this video because I didn't play the entire thing. I think I started about 4 or 5 minutes in. So definitely check it out. It's called Censorship and the Future of the Internet. And that is by Second Thought. So again, shout out to JB because he is the one that told me about Second Thought. His videos are really good. I think he has like over 1 million subs. All right, I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super sticker D33PSP33D. I like the sound of that. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Fuck, I forgot to mention Cuba. Bam, LOL. That's right. Oz says, Zucky suspended me and Convo Couch from live stream for 30 days without explanation. The guy is a pathological liar. I'm sorry to hear that, Oz. I don't even stream on Facebook. I only stream, obviously here. Hello. And Rockfin and Twitter. Marlene says, when I share you all on Facebook, I don't see it on my page. I have to share it a second time. You guys see how they do this? Shout out to Paul Bots for becoming a Sabby member. Give him a whoop, 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 whoop. Thanks for the super sticker, JM. JB says, if the alphabet gurus tell them what to do, then Facebook, that's sus at the very least. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat, CS. You think calling it alphabet is a play on words? I've wondered that, CS. Maybe it is. Okay. What's that, Paul? This is why Zuckerberg tried to get Trump to ban TikTok and why it's such a pathetically compromised site now. Interesting. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Take a look at me now. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. What you said about bots, that's a case study in the issue of the problem with automating jobs. Mark is the 15th richest person on earth, 10th in the US. Bruh, you got money. You got enough money to hire human beings to check out flags sent to your data centers by your bots. Don't give bots authority to shut down, just flag and send to human being Facebook employee. Also hire people and assign them to Facebook users. Well said, Roger. And thanks for this tip as well. Mark acting like he's too poor to hire lawyers to fight the government on behalf of his customers. Also, the reason why you never believed it before, Sabrina, was because Hunter admitted to it himself. Good points, Roger. Thank you. Oh, I don't know what that is. Oh, and thank you for this tip as well. Mark, I read that one already, I think. Yeah. And thank you, Dave. Thank you to Sabby for speaking the word. Thanks, Dave. How about a knockout and a punch? All right, guys. So we're going to talk about this on Call-In tonight. I want to hear from you guys. I think that episode, I have it scheduled to start at 10. I'm going to take a quick break really quick. And I do need to add that link. I'll take the break. I'll add the link and pin it to the chat so you guys can click on it. Eric will pop in. And yeah, man, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this.
There we go.
I'll be back.
All right. We'll see you in a little bit. Ms. Sabrina. All right. How's everybody doing on this nice Friday night? We're giving Miss Sabby Sabs a little break here, and then she'll be back on to say goodnight, and then we'll kick over to Colin. And that's when, JB Font says, leave a like now. You got it, JB. Great to see JB in the house. And yeah, we'll be kicking over to the Colin platform where you all can call in and get your say. Colin show starting soon. Let me show this thing. There we go. So there's the call-in page. Actually, I can put that link in the chat right now. Let me just find the right page here and the right link. And Sabby will also be pinning it. Let me put in this nice. There we go. A nice chat from Angela. And we're all in our places with bright, shining faces. You've got it, Angela. Do a quick edit on this thing, and we'll put in this link into the chat. There we go. All right, but if you want to get ready, excuse me. Top of the key for the pick and roll assist. Yes, Astro, we're trying. Yeah, that'll be our call-in room. And also, if you go into call-in on your computer or on your phone and just put in, just put in Sabby Sabs. It'll tend to come right up. But I also wanted to talk about and highlight here. Let me see if I can bring this up. What I wanted. Here we go. Yes, somebody in the chat earlier mentioned the movie Norma Ray when we were talking about unions and whatnot. And when I hear or think of Norma Ray, I always think of this iconic scene from the movie with Sally Field playing Norma Ray holding up the union sign. And then there's also the sign in the back saying, "Let's all pull in our waistline." But I think she worked in a it's Lawrence Norma Ray. So I think in the movie the character worked on the factory floor and was trying to unionize, and it was about that story. But I always think of that one. So then tonight, let me bring up my notes here. Yeah, we've been talking about Zuckerberg and the censorship, and one of the things I really wanted to note was that a lot of the reason why social media started censoring was because Congress made them do it. And I think it's important when we talk about these things to remember that. And it was Democrats that pushed them into it and said, either you start censoring on the platforms, censoring how we want you to and who we want you to, or they're going to start doing antitrust actions against these social media companies. And it's really insidious, because these antitrust actions are what Congress should be doing anyways. But they play this big game of maybe we won't do it if you go after Trump, and that was it was just a big part of how this happens. And yeah, basically, Zuckerberg on Rogan, admitted that they're censoring on orders from the FBI, and it's basically definitionally fascism. It's and it also goes into what like Matt Taibbi was talking about this, on his Twitter feed, and saying, why isn't this a huge story? This should be like the biggest story in the country, in a sense, in that Facebook just admits they're doing censorship on behalf of the government. Let me bring up a couple super chats. Thanks for this, AJF Milan. Gullibility, naivete. Playing dumb, stupid can be a tool to fend off culpability. Like the insanity defense. Social Network Film did a good job on illustrating how Mark is devious. Thanks for that, AJF. And yeah, that makes me think of how they're basically, there are no good billionaires. It's like you don't get to that position by being a nice guy or a decent person. And I think we also got another chat out here on the paid comment out here on the Rock Fins. See if I can bring that up. Come on. That ain't working. Here, let me remove this. We gotta go to this one. We gotta play with our windows. Here we go. And then it scrolled. There we go. Come on. I'm playing with multiple windows here. Here we go. Thanks for this tipped comment on the Rock Fins from Dave Burt. I'm glad Sabby doing the whole wide-ranging show here. I didn't see the whole thing, but important issues. And thank you for that, Dave Burt. There we go. And we'll hit this over here. Let's bring back Mr. Matt Taibbi. See what he's got to say. So he was talking about disappearance, and then there were, other comments. And Matt said that the FBI warning Facebook away from a factual true story is incredibly ominous. The information police are here. Based on that, Mr. Matt. And then and then some idiot replies to Taibbi, "You really jumped the shark, dude. There was a massive disinformation happening. Do you have a problem with filtering it out, or do you prefer Russia influencing our elections?" And Taibbi's, just swats this guy down pretty easily, saying, "This was a true story. Same in 2016. The dump Zuckerberg referred to was all true material." There we go. And of course it goes on and on from there. Let's hit that around here.
Cool.
So Taibbi's always, really just based on these issues. It's and in a way it's really not. I mean, this shouldn't be a difficult call, right? I mean, this is free speech. This is,
exactly.
You let everything go unless you have a due process of law to get, to have a sanction.
That's right.
But this is the world we live in.
It is. All right, guys, we're going to transition over to call in. That link is pinned at the top of the chat. And tonight's conversation is episode 36. Mark Zuckerberg admits censorship to Joe Rogan. Mark Zuckerberg recently admitted on Joe Rogan's podcast that Facebook has censored the Hunter Biden laptop story. What are your thoughts? So we're going to talk about that tonight. Feel free to talk about other things we talked about tonight as well. But I'm actually going to go ahead and start that room early.
Starting early. All right.
Yeah.
See you call in.
All right, guys. So you know how we do this. It's so humid and my hair's like flat and it's bothering me. Anywho, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. It's Friday.